Artemis Akbary, thank you so much for coming on the show to tell your story. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for your invitation. It's an honor for me to be here and speak with you.
Thank you. Now let's start with your childhood, because you were born in Iran. Your parents were Hazara refugees from Afghanistan who'd fled to Iran, and the continued persecution of the Hazaras that carry on until today. So talk about where in Iran were you born? So talk about your childhood. What kind of a childhood Artemis Akbary had?
As you said, my parents escaped from Afghanistan because of the systematic persecution against Hazara community. So they fled to Iran, and I was born in Kashan.
Mm,
Kashan is a very small city in Isfahan province, and it's one of the most religious city in Iran after Qom province. So I grew up as a refugee and as an Afghan Hazara refugee, and also as a person who belongs to LGBTIQ community.
mm,
So when I was children, first I noticed my differences with other people. First, it was because of my ethnicity and nationalities as an Afghan refugee. I distinguished it when I was very young
mm.
because of a high level of racism in Kashan
Yeah,
city. I remember they always insulted us, and I remember they were using Afghani as an
yeah.
insult for us. So, and later on when I grew up, I was 15 or 16 year old, I noticed my differences with other people,
Mm,
with my classmates especially, because they were talking about having dates with girls, finding girlfriend. But unfortunately, I noticed that I didn't have attraction to girls, and I had attraction to my same sex, to some of my classmates. I had crush on some of them.
yeah,
So at first I felt that it's a temporary feelings,
yeah.
and then but but later on I noticed that no, it's not temporary. It's something inside of me. But as I said, I grew up in a very religious city, and my family was so conservative, so religious, and I heard a lot from religious leaders that homosexuality is a sin. They will go to hell,
Mm,
and because of these kinds of narratives that they said that homosexuality is a sin, it's criminalized in Iran. So I felt that something is wrong with me.
yeah.
So at the beginning, I remember most of my childhood coincided with feelings of being. I felt guilty.
You feel, I
I
mean, isolated, I suppose, lonely.
Yes, exactly. I felt isolated, and I was lonely because I thought that I'm the only person in this world that who has
Was feeling this way.
uh, yes, this way. Even at that time, I didn't know the term for my feeling. I didn't know what homosexuality means. I didn't
Mm,
know the terminology properly. So that's why it took many years for me to
mm,
learn about homosexuality. When I for the first time, my sister gave me a smartphone as a gift,
yeah.
and I searched on internet about my feelings, and I found the terms homosexuality on
So you had to
Wikipedia.
search the internet to find, initially you thought, what's wrong with me? And then,
Exactly.
and then you felt lonely, I suppose. And then your sister gives you a smartphone, and then you search you search the internet what's wrong with you. But
Exactly.
just before we get, we move on, the city of Kashan, it's known for its rugs, Persian rugs, right?
Yes.
Now
Yes.
it's located between the city of Qom and Isfahan. Now, for our listeners and those who watch, if you've not been to Iran, when you go to Isfahan, I think, because I spent time in Qom
Yes.
and also in Tehran, it's 2000 2001. So when you go towards Isfahan, I think you go from Isfahan with Tehran to Qom, and then from there to Kashan, and then to Isfahan. That's right.
Yes.
So
It's in the sense located in the
yeah,
central
but
of
the
Iran.
thing I want to say, there's this long road. It's called the motorway, Jade Kashan, the Kashan
Yes.
Road. As you pass the you know, after you pass the city of Qom, there's a bridge, and you pass the bridge. On your right, there are you know, granite factories. So I used to work, you know, there's a kind of a,
Oh,
yeah, I used to when I was 14, 13, 14, I used to work in one of those, you know, granite factories. And incidentally, one of the I carry a mark on my right eyebrow, and it's just a cut which has stayed there. There's this factory owner. If somebody knows him, if you've got listeners in Iran and you know him, that factory owner, his name was Arji Hussein, I think, and the factory's name was Millat factory, kind of, yeah. And he made me work, I don't know, from dawn to dusk for 3 months. And after 3 months, when I went and asked for my wages, he took a granite ashtray and hit me with it. So I've got this cut on me, and I had to make a runner. So when you talk about Kashan, the Kashan Road, the Kashan Motorway, also Jewelway, whatever you call it, I know that very well. Now, getting back to you, so you know that feeling of loneliness, that feeling of you being you, and also that guilt that you talk about being, you know, what did your I mean, what were your parents doing? Not in terms of, you know, I'm just asking about the environment that you grew up in.
well, I remember when I was kid, my parents, they didn't, at the beginning, they didn't notice my differences with other people, but I remember my relatives,
No, no, what I'm
my
asking
uncles and
is
aunts.
what were they doing work-wise?
Oh,
So,
work was. Oh, okay, sorry. I thought that you
yeah, yeah,
asked me
we'll go.
about
Yeah, yeah,
their
you
relationship.
can then carry on to talk about that. Yeah, yes, fine. Yeah.
Yes, my parents are illiterate and they were workers. I remember, as you know, as you said, Kashan is famous because of its rocks, and I grew up with many rocks because when I was kid, we were working in the rocks factory for many years. So
And you
I
did.
know how.
I'm actually
Yes,
sitting on one
as
of
a
those
kid.
drugs from Kashan. So, you know, we've got one imported from Kashan. So,
Yes, Kashan is very famous because of its rocks. So now I'm an expert
okay.
on preparing and making rocks. So yes, my parents were just simple workers in Iran, and they've worked in factories for rocks, and in farms. For example, Kashan also is famous for cottons
And
and
pomegranate.
yes, and melons, watermelons.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so yes, they worked in farms and factories. So they were worker, and economically we were not in a good situation. So we were under the line of poverty, I think,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah.
most Afghans are under the line of poverty in Iran.
So going through the school system, at least you had the opportunity to go to school, which, you know, most refugee kids in Iran don't have that. But you did have that opportunity to go to school, and you talk about the difference that you felt you had with other children and other teenagers. Now, teenagers, as it is with any teenager, is such a tumultuous period in your life where, but with you, as you said, you felt lost in this, you know, feelings that you had, and you searched the internet to find out what's wrong with you. So what did that, you know, how did that realization come about?
Uh, well, the realization of my feelings and
No, what
my
did you,
sexual
you know,
orientation.
finding the right terminology, I suppose, and you know, you're searching the internet and you're trying to read about,
Yes,
in quoting you, what's wrong with you. Um,
exactly.
so
Well, let me say this first. When I was a teenager, I remember I was in my middle school, and many people told me that you act girlish or
ah,
دخترانه, and
yeah,
also most of my
feminine.
relatives,
You were kind of
y-
a feminine
yes,
boy.
yes, they called me that you act like a girl, you're girlish, or you have a feminine behavior. And I remember when I was playing with other kids. I didn't like to play football. I hate football actually. So I remember I was more interested in something else, other to play with my sisters rather than my brother. Or I remember that I like cooking.
Mm.
But I didn't want to be a football player or pilot, because in our context, usually men can be a
Yeah.
pilot, not girls or women. But I wanted to be I don't know, a doctor or a scientist. And in our society, I think they didn't like my behavior, and most of the time my uncles or aunts, they called me that you look like a girl, you act girlish, and I felt so bad, because I felt, as you said, I felt isolated because of all these differences that I had with other people. And and when I was in the high school, also my classmates told me that you act girlish, your behavior is different, and all the time I was putting myself on I put pressure on myself to act more
Boyish.
boyish, or
Yeah.
to be more masculine. and and when I searched about my problems or
Mm.
on internet, I noticed, first I found the term homosexuality or hamjinsgarayi on
Yeah. Yeah.
internet. And I searched and I searched in Farsi about homosexuality in Farsi, on internet, and I read many articles, many Islamic articles, that they
Yeah.
condemn homosexuality, and they said that they will go to hell. There were some quotes from Quran about Lut, Qawm
Mm-hmm.
Lut,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah. There's a verse in the Quran about, a community of, yeah.
yes. And because of that, I felt so guilty, and I was so depressed just because of my feelings. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that I at that time I was so religious, and I think it was because of my parents and the society. So I felt that I'm guilty, and I was praying most of the times, and I asked for forgiveness from God to just forgive me because of having this feeling. And I tried to change my sexual orientation and feelings,
Mm.
by praying, by reading Quran 1,000 times. And because of all of this pressure, I was just at that time 15 or 16-year old. I was so young, but I had to deal with a lot of problems, dealing with my isolate, with my I don't know, I had to deal with isolation with my parents, with the society, about the judgment of other people. So I was under a lot of pressure. But so unfortunately, I remember, because of all of these problems, depression, people's
Mm-hmm.
judgments, my parents' behavior with me, my relatives' behavior. Unfortunately, I attempted to do suicide.
Oh.
So because I couldn't bear this situation anymore. Uh, and I remember I was so sad,
Yeah.
and I attempted to do suicide by cutting my hand. And but it was unsuccessful, fortunately. But my parents realized that I wanted to kill myself, and they asked me a lot, why did you do this? I don't know what happened to you, what's wrong with you. So at that time I decided to trust them and tell
Mm.
them about my feelings. So I told them that I have this kind of feeling and I'm gay. But my parents were so, they are illiterate,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're so conservative and religious, and I didn't understand me, and they put me under a lot of pressure, and they tried to change my feelings, my behavior, my sexual orientation, by taking me to mosques, to mullahs. And
Yeah.
I visited many mullahs, and they told them about my feelings. And I remember they told my parents that, one of them was really interesting. He told my parents that there is a gene inside of his body,
You've been
and he has.
possessed.
Yes, I'm possessed with the genes, and I had to read 40 times Quran, and I think
Mm.
it's 1,000 pages,
Yeah.
in order to be released from that gene. My parents suddenly, their behavior suddenly changed, because they thought that I'm not their kids anymore. So so I they put me under a lot of pressure to read Qurans, to fast for 40 days in Ramadan, or and after, I think, 1 month, 1 or 2 months when it didn't work, they took me to psychologists, and they asked for recommendations from Iranian psychologists to kind of cure me.
Mm.
And even I think it was 2017, they took me to Iraq, Karbala, to ask
Okay.
Imam Hussein or
Yeah.
Imam Ali to cure
But
me.
you know, all that, just to throw in something, sorry, there's a lot of costs given where your parents were and the poverty that you mentioned and the desperation, whatever, however misguided they were, given the cultural and religious context of the area. That sense of desperation that really comes across through you telling the stories. And were they trying to hide you and what you were going through from other relatives, or the sense of shame that they carried with them, and this sense of desperation that trying to change you?
Yes, they try to hide me from my relatives because at that time, since my childhood, most of my relatives told me that you act girlish, you are not like other boys,
Mm.
and they judged me very badly. So that's they try to hide me, and unfortunately, even I wasn't able to go to even to visit some of my friends uh, alone because I wasn't allowed to, because they noticed that I'm gay. So if I go with I don't know, with one of my male classmates, something will happen, or they had this kind of fear that maybe one day I will have a sex with one of my classmates or friends, or I will have a same-sex relationship with someone, and it will be a shame for
Yeah. Yeah.
for our families, and they had these feelings, so they kind of isolated me or kind of imprisoned me in the house. So I
Mm.
was just
Mm.
allowed to go to school, and then or to the university, and it was really a tough time,
Yeah.
and because they couldn't understand me properly. But it took a lot of time to talk with them to reduce the pressure a little bit. But just I reduced it a little bit.
Mm.
But even I remember, even I wasn't allowed to watch movies that had boys. I remember we were watching this series uh, in in the TV, and there was a very young, pretty boy, and suddenly I think it was night, and suddenly I thought, wow, that's a cute boy, and
Mm.
suddenly they changed the channel, and they talked with me in a very bad way, and they told me that it must be your last time that you are talking like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So yes, I had a lot of experiences like this
And
with.
what would you did go to university, you did get to university in Iran, and then what happened that made you flee Iran?
Well, it's a very long story, and I don't want to go into it because
Yes, I
it's
mean
very
just
traumatizing for
to
me.
just
But
to the snippet, I suppose the just cover it as much as you want and you're comfortable with.
yes, when I went to university, I found a boyfriend in
Mm.
Iran. But I told my parents that I'm going to university every Thursday. But every Thursday I was visiting my ex-boyfriend at that time in Iran.
Mm.
And at that time, when I was 19 or 20 year old, and I grew up, and I had smartphones, and I was able to watch videos, movies about the situation of LGBTIQ people in other countries,
Yeah.
and I at that time I felt that I'm in a prison with all of these pressures, depression. I felt isolated, and that's why I decided to fled from Iran and go to Turkey, to change my life. I
Mm.
wanted to just freedom. I wanted to just release myself from all the violences that I experienced from my families, from my friends, because I think it was 2017. That year was really, really difficult for me because I was humiliated. I was beaten multiple times just because of my sexual orientation, by my parents, by my friends, by some random people in the society, and I faced extra layers of violence at
Yeah.
that time. So I couldn't tolerate it anymore. So I decided to just go
Leave.
to Turkey, leave this country forever, to change my life. So that's why I escaped to Turkey to start a new life without discrimination and violence. But unfortunately, I was wrong because I experienced all of those things again in Turkey.
But eventually, you went through this horrible, unimaginably painful experience, which I know, and we've spoken before about it, how traumatic they have been, and how difficult you find to talk about that. I really, really appreciate and feel privileged that you are talking to me, and I'm grateful that you do. And of course, we've spoken about mental health and suicide, and anyone who watches who have been through or who go through difficult periods, fine. It's fine to be not okay. And, if you need help in any way, please do contact your doctors or, wherever you are. And if you cannot do that, please talk to somebody, seek help. It's, you'll be fine. And then you came to Europe. And did your activism for LGBTQ rights begin in Turkey, or did it begin in Czech Republic, where you're based now?
Well, I started my activism in Turkey because when I moved to Turkey, I had many challenges with housing, with the language, with finding job, and I experienced homophobia and transphobia in Turkey. It was a really difficult time. So when I fortunately, when I found house, when I found a proper job, and then I found other friends from LGBTIQ community. I found Afghan and Iranian LGBTIQ community that they escaped from Afghanistan, from Iran, because of the same reason. They experience violence, discrimination, just because of their sexual identity or gender expression or sexual orientation. Just because of those things, they face violence, and they came to Turkey, like me. And we shared the same stories. We had the same experience from our countries. So I decided to do something because when I entered Turkey, I didn't have house, I didn't have food to eat, I didn't have job, I didn't know the language, and it was really difficult for me to tackle with all of these issues. So I decided to do something, and I established a network with my boyfriend and other LGBTIQ volunteers in Turkey to help the newcomer LGBTIQ asylum seekers, to help them with housing, with their registration, and asking for asylum in Turkey, because we found out that there are many Afghan LGBTIQ people, especially transgender people, that they didn't have house, and they were sleeping in parks or on the street, and they were raped multiple times by different peoples, or they were sex workers, or there were many lesbians that they were sexually assaulted in Turkey, just because they didn't have any place to go. They didn't know the asylum procedure, so they didn't know what to do, where to go to ask for asylum. So we decided to help them. So I started my activism through. I began it with helping LGBTIQ asylum seekers. Then, when Afghanistan fell down, and before that, I joined Radio Ranginkaman, which is the first and only media outlet for LGBTIQ Afghans. So I decided to raise awareness about LGBTIQ community by storytelling. In my radio program, the title of the program is Inja Pamir. Pamir is the name of the mountains in Afghanistan, and I think it's a symbol of resistance, resilience of LGBTIQ community. And in that program, I share the stories of LGBTIQ people from Afghanistan, and I try to raise awareness by storytelling. Then Afghanistan fell down in 2021, and I remember I received thousands of voice messages, emails, on many messages on WhatsApp, Instagram, that they were begging for help. So, but unfortunately, through Radio Ranginkaman or Rainbow Radio, we cannot help people because it's a media. So at that time, we established our organization, ALO, or ALO, which is the abbreviation of Afghan LGBTIQ plus organization, and we established it in Turkey. When I was in Turkey, because of my activism, unfortunately, I was beaten by some Afghan asylum seekers because they believe that I'm a shame for Afghan community. So that's why I escaped from I moved from Turkey to Czech Republic, and in Czech Republic I established my organization, and it was October 2021 that I came to Czech Republic, and through my organization, I decided to raise awareness for LGBTIQ people, to advocate for their rights, not just at the national level, but at the international level, and also providing humanitarian aid to the individuals inside Afghanistan and LGBTIQ asylum seekers from Afghanistan in Iran, Turkey, or Pakistan. So we provided financial aid to hundreds of people in 2021, and in coordination and collaboration with other international organizations, we helped dozens of LGBTIQ people to come to Europe to ask for asylum here, and now we are advocating at the UN level and international level to hold the Taliban accountable for all of those atrocities that they are committing against LGBTIQ people.
But you know, everything you've done is so incredibly inspiring and admirable. But they've all been achieved through an enormous personal cost. Now, you know, when you talk at gatherings, meetings of, you know, the UN, other human rights organization, when you advocate for the right of LGBTQ plus in Afghanistan, what are the responses that you get?
Well, as you said, my activism was costly. First, I want to talk a little bit more about this because of my activism, I was beaten by some Afghan refugees in Turkey.
Yeah.
And I lost my friend, many of my friends, my parents, my siblings, and even I received a lot of death threats from my relatives. For example, at the beginning of my activism, I remember that my cousins threatened me that if I see you, I will kill you with 100 bullets. And unfortunately, it is very hard to be an LGBTIQ activist in the context of Afghanistan, and even in Europe. Unfortunately, let me say like this: LGBTIQ people in Afghanistan or in Iran, they experience violence from their family, from the society, from the government. And when I came to Europe and I started my activism here, I noticed that we even experience violence and discrimination, sometimes from the civil societies and human rights defenders. Because
of Afghanistan origin.
Yes. For example, as you said, I was in multiple conferences and I was harassed by some of them. Or I don't know if I'm allowed to use that word, but they called me I don't know if
no, absolutely fine. I mean, you know, you feel
okay
free
you?
Feel free.
Yeah.
You know, it's your story, and you can say whatever you want.
Yes, because I want to show you that.
Yeah.
I was in Belgium, I think. Yes, I was in Belgium in one of the conference for Afghanistan, and I remember one Afghan human rights defenders. She told me that, "Oh my God, look at it! Look at him now, faggots demanding their rights." And it was really harsh, and I felt so bad that why a human rights defender called me an faggots, and she didn't even consider me as a human being. And because at that conference, I spoke about all the challenges LGBTIQ people experience in Afghanistan. I told them that many people have been killed by their family members, by their fathers. They have been killed by the Taliban. And I shared with them many terrible stories. But still, she believed that we are not human and we deserve to be killed. And she called me a faggot. And this is the reality of Afghanistan and the region even, that they do not consider LGBTIQ people as a human. So that's why my activism faced many challenges. So always I had to include myself in conferences or dialogues about Afghanistan. For example, there were many conferences about the future of Afghanistan, about peacemaking, peace building in Afghanistan, but they didn't include LGBTIQ people because they don't consider LGBTIQ people as a marginalized group in Afghanistan. So, for example, in the context of UN, even they always bring women's rights activists or activists from an ethnic minority or from a religious minority, but they don't bring an activists from LGBTIQ people by themselves. We as an LGBTIQ people must put pressure on them to include us in all discussions about Afghanistan. So there is a systematic discrimination, I think, even within the civil societies or even within the UN.
So I just wanted to point that out because, look, Afghanistan as a country, the society as a whole. Now, the diaspora, as you mentioned, are the mirror image of that people, that community of people that are in Afghanistan. And, it's not controversial to say the country as a whole, the society as a whole is incredibly homophobic and hateful. And they'd abuse, I feel awful saying this, but they'd go to any length to persecute you. They abuse at extreme level other people who are being themselves, who express themselves as being who they are. And that's why, it is such an incredibly brave thing to do, to be yourself as to who you are, to declare as to who you are. And now, going back to that UN thing, or international organization, given the way the society as a whole is, given the human rights defenders, as you mentioned, are also, strong tendencies, even if they're living in the West, they still carry the same prejudices and values that are from Afghanistan. And do you feel that in a sense translates into, pressure onto the international organization who are supposed to be dealing with, defending human rights? Are they scared of even mentioning you or the plight of the community that you advocate for?
Well, they are not. I don't know. I think they are not scared, but I think. Let me say about the UN like this. For example, when I won the UN in Geneva, when I wanted to go for a Human Rights Council session about Afghanistan 3 months ago, you have to be registered by an organization who has the ECOSOC status, and in the form, the registration form that they said they just consider men and women as two genders, and it's very binary, and they don't consider the non-binary people as a third gender identity. They don't recognize it. So this is another thing that we have in the UN. So in a broader context, we can see that, for example, there is a systematic exclusion of LGBTIQ people. I want to say it like this because, for example, we have UNAMA in Afghanistan, for example.
Yeah.
It operated for more than 2 decades in Afghanistan. Have you seen any reports from UNAMA about the persecution of LGBTIQ people? No, unfortunately. Have you seen any humanitarian programs led by UNAMA in Afghanistan for LGBTIQ people? No. Even now that they speak against the Taliban most of the times at the Security Council, when they want to speak about the human rights violations, they don't mention the human rights violation of LGBTIQ people. They just say human rights violation against women and girls, ethnic minorities, religious minorities, not LGBTIQ people. Or even at the Security Council, for 78 years since the establishment of a Security Council, we had just one official or regular session about LGBTIQ people. It was about Colombia. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And one informal meeting at the Security Council last year about LGBTIQ people in conflict zones. In that meeting, I spoke there. And that time was the first meeting of Security Council about LGBTIQ people. And the second was 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we can see that LGBTIQ people, because the role of Security Council is to maintain international peace and security, to address all of these challenges. But we can see that, for example, LGBTIQ people face violence, discrimination during the conflict, for example, both by state actors and non-state actors. And they can be targeted just because of their gender expression or sexual orientation and gender identity quickly, and they can be killed by the state actors and non-state actors, for example, by the Taliban, by the ISIS, and other armed groups. But the Security Council never addressed these issues, or they didn't want to address it. Even we don't have any resolution by the Security Council to condemn the attacks against LGBTIQ people in Afghanistan, in Iraq, Syria, or other countries. And I think it's because of the structure of the Security Council, which is a problematic, for example, because we have Russia and China, two countries that they are really homophobic. And then because of the international law, we have many problems in the international law. The international law and international humanitarian law, it's not LGBTQ friendly. For example, we have, I know some of the terminologies must be complicated and confusing, but for example, we have responsibility to protect principle, or R2P principle, which states that states
responsibility to protect
their population against genocide, war crimes, and other human rights violations or ethnic cleansings. And when the state failed to protect their population, it is the responsibility of the international community to protect the population. But even the principle is problematic. It's very binary. It doesn't include LGBTIQ people. Or we have other principles. For example, we have WPS, Women, Peace and Security Agenda, which was adopted by the Security Council in October 2000, which states that women and girls must benefit from conflict prevention, protection, and participation in peacemaking and peacebuilding efforts. And it recognizes the extra layers of violence that women and girls experience in conflict zones. But their definition from women and girls is very limited. It doesn't include trans women, intersex women, lesbian, bisexual women. So we can see still in the international law and international humanitarian law, we have all of these issues and problems. And I think all of these systematic exclusion of LGBTIQ people from for example, peace and security negotiation about Afghanistan, intra-Afghan dialogue, it's because of all of these problems rooted in international law and international humanitarian law, and also in the structure of the Security Council and the UN in general.
And now, talk about the life of a member of LGBTQ plus community, just an individual in Kabul or anywhere in Afghanistan, who's going through the same trauma, emotional and mental, and of course, the sense of isolation that you went through. But it's all within himself. It's in all, there within himself. And he or she decides to declare his or her identity. What would happen to that person? Now, just give us a snapshot to our listeners and read and those who watch us, just who don't know what would happen to somebody who declared to be themselves in Afghanistan today. What would happen?
Well, I can share a story of two people with you. One of them is Saher. Saher, I think, Saher was 11 or 12-year-old that her family forced her to marry a very old man, and she was just a kid that they forced her to marry a man. And she told me that after 3 or 4 years, she realized about her sexual orientation, and she noticed that she is a lesbian. But unfortunately, she told me that Saher told me, I experienced rape and sexual assault every night, every week, because I didn't have feeling to my husband, and I had feeling to my same sex. And because of my forced marriage, she told me that I got pregnant and I gave birth to my son. But she told me that I I faced violence, domestic violence from my husband, from my families, just because of my sexual orientation to girl. And she told me when Afghanistan fell down, the situation became so complicated, and that's why she decided to escape with her son from Afghanistan to Iran. And she told me that with the help of smugglers, she escaped from her house and she moved to Kabul. And from Kabul, she moved to Herat. And then, with the help of smugglers, she crossed the border and she moved to Iran. And she stayed in Iran for a few weeks because she didn't have visa to stay. She had this fear of being deported to Afghanistan. And she was sure that she told me that I was sure that if I would be deported to Afghanistan, Taliban or my husband would have killed me. So that's why she decided to move to Turkey, again with the help of the smugglers, to find at least a little bit freedom in Turkey with her son. She told me that I crossed the border again from Iran to Turkey with the help of the smugglers. When she called me, I think it was at the end of 2022, she was crying and she told me that when I wanted to cross the border with the help of smugglers, the smugglers raped me in front of my friends, in front of my son. And she told me that when I entered to Turkey in Istanbul, I didn't have any place to stay. And Sahar and her son, they stayed in parks for a few weeks. And Sahar was crying again, and she told me that I was again sexually assaulted in the park in Istanbul. And she told me that she was crying and begging for help. And she told me that when I was in Afghanistan since my childhood, I was raped. Again, in Iran, I had to become a sex worker to feed my child. And again, at the border between Iran and Turkey, she was sexually assaulted. And again in Turkey. And immediately we helped her with financial aid. We connected her to other organizations to help her with the accommodation. But at that time, the Turkish authorities announced that we do not register Afghan asylum seekers who escaped because of the Taliban. So the immigration office of Turkey didn't register her, and she attempted multiple times, but they didn't register her. And she had this feeling of she told me that I have this fear that one day I will be deported to Afghanistan because I don't have visa or residency in Turkey. So again, she asked for help, but with financial aid, we gave her a little bit money, but she wanted to use that money to cross the border again from Turkey to Greece. I remember I warned her many times. I told her that don't use this way because it's very dangerous. It's winter. It's very risky, but she didn't listen to me. But she promised me that when she arrived in Greece, she would call me and inform me. But unfortunately, after that night, I didn't hear anything from her. And I contacted other organizations in Turkey, some of the friends that I knew in Istanbul, because I introduced her to some of my friends to help her with shelter and accommodation. I contacted them. We contacted many organizations, Red Cross, IOM, but unfortunately we couldn't find her. So there is a possibility that she has been killed in the Mediterranean Sea. This story is very heartbreaking because it reminds me of extra layers of violence that a lesbian experience during their journey, self-identification, the forced marriage, escaping from Afghanistan, all of those problems in Turkey, and now we don't know anything about Sahar. But and there is another story that there was a transgender woman. When I started my work with Radio Ranginkaman, I interviewed her, and it was before the fall of Afghanistan. She told me that her father tried to kill her when she noticed that she has a relationship with a man, and she told me that my father took a knife, and her father wanted to just kill her with the knife, but her sister and mother helped her. and she escaped from her house and she moved to Mazar Sharif, which is a bigger city,
Yeah,
and
in the
she stayed
north.
there. Yes, in the north. And but she couldn't find job because of her gender expression and gender identity as a trans woman in Afghanistan. So she had to dance in bacha bazi
Yeah.
parties and to earn a little bit money. And but she told me that she was sexually assaulted and in bacha bazi parties in
Mm.
Afghanistan. And when Afghanistan fell down, she asked for help, and she's now in Europe. She asked for help, and at the beginning, the situation was chaos, and we couldn't do that much because we didn't have a specific evacuation program for LGBTIQ people at that time. And a few weeks later, she was crying, and she was begging for help, and she told me that she was beaten by the Taliban because of her dress code and gender
Mm.
expression. And she told me that the Taliban slapped her on the street and they brutally cut her hair
Mm.
and uh, and threatened her that if we see you in this way, we will imprison you. And she asked for help. And there was another gay man that in the first week of the arrival of Taliban in Kabul contacted me, and he told me that he was sexually assaulted by two Taliban soldiers in Kabul. He told me that his name is Muhammad, and he's in Europe now. He told me he wanted to cross the checkpoint, Taliban's checkpoint, and in the checkpoint they checked his cell phone and they saw some pictures and videos of gay people or same-sex relationship or kiss of two men,
Mm.
and because of that they took him to Hausa or I don't know in English,
Police
police
station.
station. Yes, and they lashed him for 80 times just because of those pictures and videos, and they lashed him again for more again 80 times just because he had a tattoo on his right hand. And also there is a story of Ghulam which is documented by Outright International and Human Rights Watch, that Ghulam is an LGBTIQ activist who was killed by the Taliban, and his brother talked with Outright International, and he told the Outright International that his brother was arrested and then he was killed in front of his house by the Taliban. Ghulam was an LGBTQ activist on social media. He was sharing some articles about LGBTIQ people to raise awareness about the community on Facebook, but she was trapped by the Taliban and she was killed. There are many other stories, many trans women that they have been
Mm.
disappeared, many LGBTIQ people that in prison they have been sexually assaulted by the Taliban. Recently, we published a report about the systematic sexual violence against LGBTIQ people, and we documented and highlighted 16 narratives of LGBTIQ people that have been raped by the Taliban. One
And
of
that
them was
report
Sophie.
is available on your website, afghanlgbt.com.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it's available on our website and they can read it. Sophie was a transgender woman who was raped, who was arrested, abducted, and kidnapped by 6 Taliban soldiers, and she was raped by 6 Taliban soldiers. They gang raped her,
Mm.
and she was gang raped by 6 Taliban soldiers, including their commanders. And after that, they threatened her multiple times to come to their place, and she was raped multiple times and in different times by the Taliban groups. And she asked for help, and we helped her to come to go to Pakistan and then come to Europe. But she is still dealing with all of those trauma, with all of those memories that they had in Afghanistan, and she attempted to do suicide here, even in Europe.
Oh.
And there is a very nice person that I really like him. He's a trans man in
Yeah.
Afghanistan. In the day of his departure from Afghanistan to Georgia, because we helped him to come to Europe, but he has to go to Georgia first, and from Georgia he came to Europe in Sweden. In the day of his departure at the airport, the Taliban soldiers stopped him, and they stopped him because of his gender identity. Because he's a trans man, and Taliban perceived trans men as a woman.
Mm.
So they stopped him and they asked him, "Are you a man or are you a boy or girl?" And they asked him so many questions, and then they took him to a room to check his body, and he told me that he was sexually harassed by the Taliban in that room. Not sexually harassed, he was sexually assaulted by the Taliban.
Mm.
And now he's in Europe, in Sweden, and he attempted to do suicide, I think 4 or 5 times, because he told me that, because still I have those nightmares, and I cannot forget all of those things that he experienced. And with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he again committed suicide because he felt that probably Russia will attack Sweden, because there were many news that Russia probably will attack Finland and Sweden. And he attempted to do suicide because he had this fear of experiencing
Going
all
through
of
the
those
same
violences.
experience again.
Yes, in Sweden. And he attempted to do suicide. And unfortunately, he was harassed, unfortunately, and beaten by other Afghan refugees in Sweden. So we can see that even Europe is not the
It's
safe
not
haven
safe.
for LGBTIQ people, or many LGBTIQ people that we helped them to come to Germany. They were sexually harassed by other asylum seekers from Syria, Iraq, Iran, or Afghanistan in the immigration camp, because of just their identity as an LGBTQ person. So many of them told me that we don't. Many of them dealing with trauma and with all of these problems, even here in Europe. And I heard this term many times, that they told me that we are suffering from invisible pain, invisible wounds, that no one can cure it. And I think this is this invisible pain and wounds eventually harming our community, even in Europe or in Afghanistan or other countries.
But there's also another element of abuse that, is so prevalent. And of course, as you so eloquently said, arriving in the safety of Europe doesn't mean that you're safe from the same people who fled persecution themselves. Now, the persecuted is persecuting another minority, but that persecution does not just, that it's not just physical, it's emotional and mental, which carries on in the realm of social media. So, how prevalent is that? Because you can escape from one person or, one group of people and move to another city to protect yourself. But from social media, how is that? I mean, is there a mechanism that supports LGBTQ plus members through these platforms, or it just goes unabated? Because when you face threats, as you do online, when you report them, the emotional impacts, I think the last time, when we talked about before the interview, you talked about the emotional impacts that they have on you. And of course, combination of all these pressures forces people to go underground again, to make themselves invisible or to hide their identity. And again, you're going through the same process of being lonely, being isolated, being scared.
Well, we don't have any mechanism on social media to protect LGBTIQ community, especially on Twitter. Unfortunately, Taliban members are so active on social media, specifically on Twitter, because and Instagram, because they harass LGBTIQ people on social media, on Twitter, by their comments, by their threats, by their death threats. For example, I remember that I shared the shared the picture on Twitter with my boyfriend on Twitter, and I remember I
Went to
received many
concerts? You
death
went to a
threats.
concert, you lucky
No,
couple?
that one, not that
Not
one,
that
but
one,
last year
because you went to the
it
Google, you went to the Gugush concert, isn't it? So that's
yes.
prominent. Yeah, yeah, you
But many
lucky.
people didn't notice that. But many people didn't notice that Ali is my boyfriend because there was a lady behind me, and when I on my Twitter I said that me and my spouse
Yes,
we went to the concert. Many people thought that that lady is my partner, not
the
the
man.
Ali, my boyfriend. Yes, the man. So yes, I think it was last year, the Pride. We were in Vienna Pride parade,
Yeah,
and we shared a picture, and I received many comments and also many private message on Twitter that they threatened me with death, with many horrible things. And also I had an interview with one of the Iranian TV channel,
yeah,
Manoto TV channel. And I remember when they shared my interview on their Instagram, and their Instagram has 13 million followers. I think it was in 2 days I received, I think, more than 1,500 um, messages on Instagram that all of them threatened me with death. And it was really shocking for me, and it was really heavy. So I decided to just stop working for a month because
yeah,
because most of their messages were so traumatizing, and I really scared because even uh, even most of them were in Europe. When I clicked on their profiles and I saw their
yeah.
pictures, some of them were even in Europe, and they're threatening me with death. So I decided to stop working for a month. Or 2 or 3 months ago, I deactivated my Instagram and Twitter just because of all of these
The
attacks on
abuse.
social
Yeah,
media and abuses. And my colleagues experienced the same thing, that they were harassed and or they were targeted on social media by these sorry for my language, but by these idiot people
yeah.
that they harass and abuse us.
No, I mean, with all the things you've shared, and I'm so incredibly lucky to have had the opportunity to listen to your story, and you've been such a courageous man to share that story with me. And it's really been a privilege. And are there things that make you hopeful? I mean, it may sound, given what we've discussed, it may sound a weird question, but are there things that make you hopeful? But also, what is it that keeps you going? Where do you get all that energy from?
Well, um, I I remember when Afghanistan fell down, we helped a gay man from Baghlan province.
Mm,
He he lost one of his leg because of bomb explosion a few years ago. He was gay. He lost one of his leg, and he experienced many violences in Afghanistan just because of his sexual orientation. And when Afghanistan fell down, we helped him to come to Europe, and he's in Spain now.
mm,
And and the moment that I talked with him uh, uh, on WhatsApp, we had a video call, and he was crying, and he told me that thank you for saving my life. And I remember that I was so happy because of him, and I decided to help more people to just have that feeling of victory. Because when he arrived in Spain, I felt we did a great thing. It was a big victory in my life. It was, I think, still I feel that it is my biggest victory that I helped Farhad to come to Spain, and that's why I always have this memory in my head that I should experience this feeling again and again and again by helping other people, by raising their voices. So I find this energy uh, through the stories of uh, other people in Afghanistan and other people that we help them to come to Europe, because because I gain my energy from them, because they always motivate me to do something, because many people told me that we are voiceless
mm.
in Afghanistan, and you should be our voice. I don't say that I'm representing them, because I'm not their representative, but I'm doing my best to help them and raise their voice at least. I think this is my main reason.
And on that note, I mean, thank you ever so much. And
there is one more thing.
Yep,
Sorry.
go on. Yeah, there's no time limit.
The second thing that really motivates me is because of my personal stories. Because I experienced many things. I lost my friends, my families, my siblings. I lost my country, and I was humiliated. I faced violence. I escaped from Iran to Turkey to find peace and safety there. But again, I was displaced from Turkey to Czech Republic to find peace and safety. And I'm 26 years old, but unfortunately, I faced many violences. That's why I decided to help all, because I don't want the next generation of LGBTIQ people in Afghanistan and Iran experience the same thing that I experienced in the past. I want them to be in a better society, in a better world. These are the two things that really motivate me.
And on that, and you've got such an incredible amount of positive energy despite all that you went through. I'm so sorry that you had to go through them. And I am really, really lost for words of, I'm speechless about what can I say. And there's not much that I could say that would do justice to your courage and your strength. And thank you for being there, and thank you for doing all that you're doing. All strength to you, Artemis. It's been a privilege listening to your story, and thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you so much for your very kind words and for your invitation. I think advocating for LGBTIQ people is a collective work. I cannot do it just by myself. And I think by sharing this podcast with your audience, you are doing your best to share, to advocate for the rights of LGBTIQ people by raising awareness. And I also encourage other people to join us, to join our struggle and fight for a better society and better world for everyone, including LGBTIQ people.
And on that wish for a better world, thank you. It's been a privilege.
Thank you so much.